If you've ever grinded Rocket League, you've probably felt stuck at some point. Whether it's Diamond, Champ, or even Grand Champ, you're trying everything, new mechanics, fast rotations, constant challenges, but you're still not breaking through. I've been there, and I realized something game-changing. The more you try to do, the more mistakes you make. So here's what I've discovered. If you want to reach SSL, and I mean really reach that top level, you've got to start thinking about the game differently. The key isn't to do more, it's actually to do less. And I know that sounds kind of weird, right? So let's get into the core of this playstyle. It's built around one super simple concept: less is more. Seriously, that's it. But before you brush it off, let me explain why it's so effective. You see, the biggest mistakes players make, especially in the lower ranks, is thinking that the more they're involved in the play, the better they're doing. So they're chasing every ball, challenging every 50-50, and trying to be everywhere at once. It's like they're constantly trying to prove they're making an impact. But here's the truth. That's what's holding you back. At higher levels, especially once you're pushing into high GC3, low SSL, it's less about making the big flashy plays and way more about being in the right place at the right time. Instead of going for every ball, you've got to learn how to let the game come to you. And this is where the less is more philosophy that I made kind of kicks in. When I say less, I'm talking about not overcommitting. And when I say more, I mean playing smarter, not harder. So what does that look like? Let's break it down. First off, you need to understand this. Patience in Rocket League is your best friend. The more patient you are, the more opportunities you'll get to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. That's a huge part of this playstyle. Instead of constantly pushing forward, running into challenges, or trying to out-mechanic your opponent, you let them make the first move. And trust me, no matter what rank you're in, your opponents will always make mistakes. Imagine this: you're in a 2v2 game, and your opponents are pushing up, trying to force a play. Now, a lot of players would panic and immediately try to challenge. Instead, if you just hold your ground for a second, keep your positioning really solid, and wait for them to overcommit, suddenly they're out of position, and now you have a free counterattack or a clear open net on the goal. You didn't have to do anything flashy. All you had to do was wait for them to mess up. That's what I mean by less is more. And here's another key to this playstyle: don't overcommit. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's that overcommitting is the fastest way to lose games, especially at higher ranks. It's super tempting to rush in and challenge the ball, but sometimes the best move is to wait and stay in position. Let your teammate make the challenge, and you stay back to clean up any mistakes. This doesn't mean playing passively, it just means playing smart about when you make your next move. You should only challenge when you're in a really strong position. Either you've got momentum, you've got a boost, or you know the opponent is going to make a mistake. If you're not in a good position to challenge, don't go for it. It's better to stay patient and rotate back than to throw yourself into a bad position. Here's another thing a lot of players don't think about: watching your opponents. I know, you're focused on the ball, right? But when you start paying attention to what your opponents are doing, you'll start seeing patterns. Are they double committing on shots? Are they being overly aggressive and leaving their defense wide open? Are they chasing boost like it's the last drink of water in the desert? There are moments where you can take advantage. If you see them overcommitting or leaving gaps in their rotation, that's when you move in and take control of the game. But again, it comes back to being patient and smart about when you make your move. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. You don't always need to be in control of the ball to be in control of the game. Let that sink in. You don't need to have the ball on your car 100% of the time to be the one controlling the pace of the game. Sometimes it's all about field control, making sure you're positioned in a way that your opponents can't do anything effective with the ball. You can force bad plays, you can make them panic, or you can even cut off their passing lanes, all without even touching the ball. And that's where the less is more mindset shines in the brightest. You're not always the one on the highlight reel, but you're the one keeping your team in control, and you're the one setting up the winning plays. Now, the toughest part of all of this, discipline. It's so easy to get sucked into the chaos of Rocket League, the speed, the intensity, the pressure, but the players who make it to SSL are the ones who can stay calm, collected, and stick to their strategy. And they also know when to make their plays. That's what this playstyle is all about. So if you're finding yourself constantly in bad positions or feeling like you're always just a step behind, try actually doing less in your next few games. Focus on staying in position, rotating properly, and being patient. And I promise you'll see a difference in how your games go. That's the core of this playstyle. Now let's dive into something that ties directly into this, and that's positioning and rotation, which is easily one of the most critical skills in Rocket League, especially as you start climbing the ranks. So now that you get the idea of doing less, let's talk about where you should be on the field, because let's be real, you can't just sit back and wait for opportunities to fall into your lap. You need to be in the right spots to take advantage of the mistakes your opponents make. That's where positioning and rotations come in. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you found yourself chasing the ball around the field only to realize that you're completely out of position and the other team has an easy shot on your net? It happens to the best of us, but here's the thing. As you get into higher ranks, good positioning becomes the difference between winning and losing, and that's exactly why it's such a huge part of this playstyle. A key concept that I always follow in terms of positioning is play the field, not the ball. So when we talk about positioning, I want you to think about the field kind of like a chessboard. You don't want to be chasing the ball all over the place because that's what gets you into trouble. Instead, you want to position yourself in a way that you're always ready to react to the next play. Here's a really common scenario. Your teammate is pushing upfield with the ball, and you're not sure whether to follow them or to stay back. In this situation, the right move is to hang back. You don't want to be caught up too far forward in case something goes wrong. By hanging back, you're giving yourself space to react, whether you need to rotate back to defend or step up to support the next play. And this is especially true in twos. If you and your teammate are both pushing up aggressively, you're leaving your goal wide open for a counterattack. But if one of you stays a bit more conservative with your positioning, you're covering more of the field and protecting against those easy goals. So here's the tip. Don't position yourself based on where the ball is right now. Position yourself based on where the ball is going to be. You should always be thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead so that when the ball comes your way, you're already in the perfect spot to make a play. Another huge concept I follow is keeping the flow smooth. This is about rotation, as you probably noticed. This is probably one of the most misunderstood aspects of Rocket League, but once you get the hang of it, it's like night and day for your gameplay. So what even is rotation? Everyone throws this word around. My personal definition is it's the flow of the game between you and your teammates. It's making sure that everyone is covering their area of the field and not overcommitting. The reason rotation is so important is that it prevents gaps in your defense and it makes sure that your team is always ready to handle whatever the other team throws at you. Here's the simplest way to think about it. After you've made a play, whether it's a shot, a pass, or even a challenge, your job is to rotate out and let your teammate take over. You don't want to stay in the play longer than you need to. Once you've made your play, get out of the way and just rotate back to a more supportive position. And the same goes for defense. If you're the last man back and you've just made a really good save, don't immediately rush up to attack. Rotate out and let your teammates move up while you cover the back line. This constant rotation keeps your team balanced, and this also prevents those awkward moments where 2 or even 3 players are bunched up in the same spot. Another huge concept I follow is what I like to call the golden rule of rotation, which is always rotate behind. You've probably heard a lot of people talk about to always rotate back post or something like this. And one of the most common mistakes I see on especially lower ranked players is cutting rotation. This happens when a player tries to rotate in front of their teammate instead of behind them. It creates all kinds of chaos because now there are two players out of position and your team is wide open for a counterattack. So here's the golden rule of rotation. Always rotate behind your teammates. If your teammate is upfield making a play, just rotate behind them so that you're in a position to cover the goal or to support the next play. Never cut them off by rotating in front. When you rotate behind, you keep the play flowing smoothly and your team is always in a position to recover. Now, this doesn't mean you have to stay super passive and hang back the whole game. Good rotation is about staying active while maintaining structure. And if you've just made a play on offense, rotate out, grab some boost along the way, and get into position for the next play. On defense, if you've just cleared the ball, rotate back and let your teammate step in to continue the pressure. Another key part of rotation is boost management. And I can't stress this enough, which is probably why you hear me say it in almost every video. If you're constantly starved for a boost, it's probably because your rotations are off. And when you're rotating properly, you should always be able to pick up boost pads on your way back without leaving your team hanging. Here's what I want you to think about every time you rotate. Make sure you're grabbing small boost pads along the way. You don't always need the 100 boosts in the corners. Sometimes it's better to collect the small pads that are scattered throughout the field. This keeps you in the play and you'll find that you rarely run out of boost if you're grabbing these pads consistently. So let's put this all together. Your positioning needs to be smart. Don't chase the ball. Don't overcommit and hang back when you need to. And always be ready for the next play. Position yourself based on where the ball is going, not where it is. And for rotation, remember, rotate behind your teammates, not in front of them. After you've made your play, get out of the way and let your teammate step in. And finally, make sure you're managing your boost properly by picking up those small pads as you rotate. Once you start focusing on positioning and rotation, you're going to find that the game feels way more in control. You won't be scrambling to cover gaps in your defense, and you'll always be in the right spot to make a play. And that's how you set yourself up for consistent wins. That's it for positioning and rotation, two of the most important aspects of climbing ranks in Rocket League. Now, let's move on to how you can train these concepts and make them second nature in your gameplay. So, if you're used to ball chasing or overcommitting, this is going to take some time to adjust, but with the right approach to training, you'll see improvements faster than you think. Let's get into it. Let's start with free play, which is probably the most underutilized tool in Rocket League. A lot of people jump into free play and just hit the ball around aimlessly, but that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to use free play to build habits. Here's what I want you to do. When you're in free play, don't go straight for the ball. Instead, focus on positioning yourself around the field without touching the ball at all. I know it sounds kind of weird, but the point is to get used to moving efficiently and staying in good positions without being distracted by the ball. Think about where you'd position yourself if this was a live game. Practice rotating around the field, grabbing boost pads, and always being in the right place to react to whatever happens next. After a while, you'll notice that your movement becomes more calculated and less chaotic. You won't be overcommitting or ball chasing nearly as much because you've trained yourself to move with purpose. Next up, I want you to hit up some custom training packs, but I want you to focus on defensive drills. Why defense? Because the less is more playstyle thrives on solid defense. If you can lock down your defense, you're halfway to mastering this playstyle. Search for training packs that focus on making saves and clears from tough angles. I'll have a few in the description of this video, but don't just practice reacting to the ball. After each save or clear, immediately rotate back into position just like you would in a real game. A lot of players practice their defense, but they forget to practice what to do after the save, which in my opinion is just as important. Remember, once you've made a save, you shouldn't be chasing the ball upfield. Your job is to rotate out and let your teammate take over. Practicing this in custom training packs will help you build that habit. Now let's talk about 1v1s. I know, a lot of players avoid 1v1s because it feels like a completely different game. But hear me out. 1v1s are one of the best ways to practice decision making under pressure. Why? Because there's no one to cover for your mistakes, which is also what makes this mode the most tilting. If you overcommit or position poorly, you're going to get scored on. And the reason 1v1s are so valuable for this playstyle is because they force you to make smart decisions with the ball. You can't afford to overcommit because there's no teammate back to save the ball. It's just you, the ball, and the goal. This kind of pressure helps you build that discipline we talked about earlier, knowing when to challenge and when to hang back. Play a few 1v1 matches each season and focus on staying calm, playing smart, and not overcommitting. Once you start feeling more confident in ones, you'll notice that your position and decision making improve in 2v2 and 3v3 too. Another thing that will skyrocket your improvement is taking the time to review your own replays. I know it's tempting to just jump into the next game, especially after a loss, but taking a few minutes to actually analyze your mistakes can make a huge difference. Here's what I want you to do. After every session, go back and watch a couple of your matches, but don't just focus on the big mistakes. Look for moments where you could have positioned yourself better or where you overcommitted. Could you have rotated out sooner? Were you in the right spot when your teammate had possession? Did you challenge when you should have waited? These are the questions you should be asking yourself. By reviewing your gameplay, you'll start to notice patterns in your mistakes, and that's when you can start fixing them. When you're queuing into matches, I want you to have a specific goal for each game, which you can get these goals from watching your replays and choosing mistakes that you make. But don't just play to win, play to improve one aspect of your game at a time. Maybe in one match, your focus is on not overcommitting. Maybe in another match, your goal is to improve your rotations. Whatever it is, make sure you have a clear purpose in mind. And you'll find that when you focus on improving specific things instead of just grinding games for wins, you'll make way more progress in a way shorter amount of time. Lastly, I want to talk about something that's often overlooked, but absolutely critical in my opinion, and that's staying calm under pressure. And I briefly went over it earlier, but because Rocket League is such a fast-paced game, that makes it so easy to get caught up in the intensity, especially in close matches or on overtime. But the players who hit SSL are the ones who can keep a clear head even when the pressure's high. Here's a little trick I actually use when the game's getting super intense, like when you're in overtime or it's a really critical moment. Take a deep breath and actually slow your game down. Even when everything feels like it's happening fast, you can still control your pace. The more you practice staying calm, the more consistently you'll be able to make smart plays instead of panicking. So, to bring it all together, the easiest playstyle to reach SSL isn't about crazy mechanics or being the fastest player on the field. It's about being smart, calm, and consistent, mastering positioning, perfecting your rotations, and making smart decisions. That's what's going to take you from where you are now to the top ranks in Rocket League. And if you train these concepts in free play, custom training packs, and ones, and by analyzing your replays, you'll start seeing way more improvements. Remember, it's not about doing more, it's about doing less, but doing it better. That's all I have for this video. If you guys found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. I also have a Discord server where you guys can join, and honestly, that's the best way to contact me directly. I offer coaching over there. See you on the next one. Peace.